Hi, this is Mrs. Bustamante. We left off talking about glycolysis. Now we're going to talk about the next part of cellular respiration, the part that happens if we have oxygen present. So after we go through glycolysis, if we have oxygen present, we have an option. Or if we don't have oxygen present, we go through a different process. We're going to assume today we have oxygen present because most of the time we do have oxygen in a lot of the cells that we're looking for. So if we have oxygen present, we're going to go to the Krebs cycle, which, because we need oxygen, is an aerobic respiration because it's using oxygen. So why do we call it the Krebs cycle? Well, we call it the Krebs cycle really because it's named after the person who won the Nobel Prize for discovering this pathway. His name is Hans Krebs, and that's how we get the name for it. So we said it's an aerobic process. This will only happen if you have oxygen present in the cell. It occurs in the matrix of the mitochondria. So here's our mitochondria again. We have our outer membrane, we have this twisted inner membrane, and then inside that we have what we call our matrix. So it's happening here inside the matrix of the mitochondria. And pyruvic acid from glycolysis is going to enter and form a couple of different things. We're going to get some more ATP out of the Krebs cycle, we're going to get some NADH out of the Krebs cycle, and we're going to get some FADH2 out of the Krebs cycle. And we're also going to get this thing called carbon dioxide, which when we think about our major equation of cellular respiration, we always know that we get out 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. And this is where that carbon dioxide gets released from our cell and gets given off. Hence, think about when we are breathing, right, as humans and other organisms that undergo cellular respiration, they give off carbon dioxide. And this is the point at which they do. Sometimes you'll hear this called the citric acid cycle, and it's really because in a couple slides we'll see that for a moment we form some citric acid, and it's a pretty important piece of this puzzle in order for cellular respiration to take place and to happen. But most of the time people call it the Krebs cycle. Okay, so here's where we left off. Pathway to the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle, right? We had glycolysis that took our glucose molecule that entered. We got 2 pyruvic acid molecules, and we said that goes on to the Krebs cycle, right? Well, there's kind of a small problem. Pyruvic acid can't just necessarily enter the Krebs cycle and function. We actually have to change it into a molecule called acetyl-CoA. And how do we do that? Well, we use an enzyme, and the enzyme we use is called coenzyme A. Sometimes you'll see it as just CoA. But this is really important because the whole point of it, right, is to produce this molecule called acetyl-CoA from pyruvic acid, which can then go on and actually be used in the Krebs cycle. And acetyl-CoA is produced by almost all nutrients. It's in carbohydrates, it's in proteins, it's in lipids. And so we can get it a lot of different ways before it actually enters the Krebs cycle. This picture is very confusing. I'm not going to ask you to memorize all the steps at this point and all the intermediates and all the things, but I do want to talk about it a little bit just so you know why we call it the citric acid cycle and how we see some of the molecules moving through it, okay? So here is where we have pyruvic acid. Now, if you remember back to a couple slides ago, right, we saw that we took a glucose, 1 molecule of glucose, and we broke it down into 2 pyruvic acid molecules. So when we look at this diagram, we're just looking at 1 pyruvic acid molecule, but remember we're always going to have 2 for every 1 molecule of glucose that we start with. So we just talked about we need this coenzyme A, and this coenzyme A is going to take pyruvic acid and change it into acetyl-CoA, which is what we have when we enter our Krebs cycle. Acetyl-CoA combines with this 4-carbon molecule, and when they combine, they form this molecule called citric acid. So there are 4 carbons plus our 3 carbons, you can kind of think of it, and we get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon molecule. We lose some to carbon dioxide. You don't really have to count the carbons at this point. but you'll notice that we're giving off carbon dioxide as we move through this process. So acetyl-CoA and this 4-carbon molecule make this citric acid molecule. And as we move through our citric acid cycle, this is the cycle part of it, right? You're going to notice that we continue to give off carbon dioxide. 1, 2, 3, you'll notice, for 1 pyruvic acid molecule. And we get some NADH. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we get some FADH2. We also give off some ATP. Now, what's important to note is this is for 1 pyruvic acid molecule. And remember, we have 2. So when we go through and we count how many ATP we get off from this, we say that we produce 2 ATP from the Krebs cycle because every 1 pyruvic acid molecule will give us 1 ATP. And we go through this process twice, hence how we get 2. So notice this process has lots of steps. You don't have to memorize all these steps, but you do want to know that we make ATP, we make NADH, and we make FADH2. And also this is the point at which we give off carbon dioxide. And we can count them, right? Here's 1 pyruvic acid, 1, 2, 3 carbon dioxides we give off, but remember we do this twice. So that's where our 6 carbon dioxide molecules will come from in our big cellular respiration equation. So that basically is the Krebs cycle. I just want to summarize what you should know goes in and what you should know comes out, right? So the Krebs cycle, the reactant summary, we talked about pyruvic acid. And remember, we talked about really it has to be changed into this thing called acetyl-CoA. But pyruvic acid enters. We had ADP. We're going to get 2 molecules of ATP out. This is usable energy for the cell. We put NAD plus in. We're going to get some NADH out. This is going to go to the electron transport chain. We have FAD plus. This is going to make FADH, and it's going to go to the electron transport chain too. And then we get carbon dioxide out, and those carbon dioxide, we say they're byproducts. They're not going to continue on and get used in our process. But we know that that is one of the major products of cellular respiration, and this is where it comes out.